Lord Entertainer Fabian is in the game. The fusion started today. So I'm going to give you my no-fail fusion plan for this fusion. It's going to be especially important for you free-to-play challenge players out there. Hopefully, this is the big fusion. This is the anniversary fusion. This is the fusion that can move your account. Hopefully, you are prepared for it, and you have an opportunity to go after this champion because he's a good one. But I'm a little bit behind, so I haven't actually given you my review of this champion yet. So I want to talk about him, where he's going to be valuable, who he might be valuable to. That may help some of you decide whether or not you're going to go for this fusion. I am Colred. This is Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. Let's get started. I have a huge channel announcement. My next Takeover Tuesday live stream happens March 11th. That is the day before my 50th birthday. So we are going to have a massive birthday Takeover Tuesday live stream event. And then I am retiring the series. That's right. This is the last Takeover Tuesday I will ever do. Now, I love this live stream series. I've been doing it for almost 20 months. And I really enjoy talking to all of you and helping players out with takeovers. But the truth of the matter is this live stream series just doesn't fit into my schedule anymore. Now, I love live streaming, so I'm not going to stop entirely, but I'm just not going to schedule my live streams anymore. They're going to happen spontaneously whenever I happen to have the time or the inclination. So could be takeover content, could be stuff about my main account or my Hell Hades free-to-play challenge account or whatever is going on. If you are interested in catching those live streams, make sure you are a member of my Discord community and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be sure to get notifications when I actually go live. Yeah, it's the end of an era, I'm sad to say, but I hope you join me for a birthday celebration and we'll send off the Takeover Tuesday series in the best way possible. Again, that is happening March 11th. Be aware that here in the United States, the time changes on March 9th. So I'm going to try to go as early as I can in the day on March 11th. I'm shooting for 1 p.m. We'll see what happens, and then I'll try to go as late as I can. We'll do a longer stream if that's possible, but definitely come and hang out. Say hello to me, say happy birthday, and say goodbye to Takeover Tuesday. All right, that is it for now. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, here he is in game, Lord Entertainer Fabian. As you can see, a Spirit Affinity support champion from the Undead Hordes faction. Now, taking a look at his stats first, I find these stats kind of interesting because while his HP and defense are decent for a support, they're actually the lowest HP and defense of any support in the Undead Hordes faction. These are numbers that we would associate with some maybe old school supports. More recently, we've had kind of a stat bloat, but this is going in the other direction, which is kind of interesting. Simultaneously, this attack number at over 1.2k is the highest attack of any support in the faction as well. So potentially, he might be a little bit squishier than other supports, but might hit a little bit harder than other supports. We'll have to see how that plays out as we start to see players complete this fusion or pull this champion and build him out and use him in content. Now, his speed at 109 is very respectable. That's a very nice speed. And then he's got 30 resistance and 20 accuracy. The accuracy is going to be valuable because he is primarily a debuffer. We're going to see that when we take a look at his kit. Let's start with the aura here. An increased speed aura in all battles by 19%. I love this aura. It's a, kind of a standard aura. It's not super impressive, but it's highly usable, especially for you challenge players. I know that the only speed aura that I have in all battles on my account is from a High Katoon. So she doesn't fit into every team. Sometimes I need other things. It'll be nice to have another champion that has this aura because this is probably, speed auras are the best aura in the game. Generally, the one you want to use the most. Let's take a look at his skills. His A1 service in death attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit steals 10% of the target's turn meter. I really like this A1. If we compare this to, say, Vizix's A1, she hits twice as well, and she reduces turn meter by 30%, not 20%, 15% each hit. But this is a steal, which means he's going to get additional turn meter, which means you can speed him up with counterattacks and ally attacks. So I really like this A1. In addition, this places a True Fear debuff for 2 turns if the target's turn meter is fully depleted. That's not going to happen very often. It's really hard to fully deplete an enemy's turn meter unless you are using this on a counterattack. That could periodically work, and you could place a True Fear debuff based on that counterattack. So that would be kind of cool. I don't know that the second half, the True Fear really is going to play very often, but it's there. Can't hurt. Okay, the A2 Unwelcome Guest attacks one enemy, places a petrification debuff for 2 turns. This is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. And this is interesting because, first of all, I think this is only the second time we have a petrification that can just be placed, right? It is single target, but you can just pick out an enemy and petrify him. Remember that petrification removes all buffs. It prevents buffs from being placed. It prevents healing from happening. And it also prevents any turn meter fill from being applied to that champion. This also has a 100% chance of placing a True Fear debuff for 2 turns. Again, on a 3-turn cooldown on all other enemies who are not under a Fear or True Fear debuff. That's pretty cool. So it's a petrification of one champion and a True Fear on everybody else. And then there's also a passive effect. Activates this skill whenever an enemy under Fear or True Fear debuff successfully uses a skill. So this is going to be kind of interesting because what it feels like is the champion will use their skill and then they'll get petrified. So if they get through the fear, they get petrified right after the fear, after they use their skill. So they do have to successfully use the skill. It won't interrupt their ability, but basically makes them pay for being able to get through the fear. Now, I think ultimately, you're going to have to deal with like pinpoint and block debuffs, buffs, and stuff like that. Like that's something that you're going to have to think about when you're using Lord Entertainer Fabian, because obviously there are ways to counter this skill, but this is extremely powerful. And again, we don't know how hard it's going to hit, but it might hit decently hard. We'll have to see. The A3 is Spectral Flourish. This is on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. Attacks all enemies. Before attacking, has a 100% chance of decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns. This is really nice because this is basically a buff strip that won't trigger polymorph. Okay. Now, these abilities will trigger polymorph because of the True Fear, the petrification. All of this could trigger polymorph, but this skill won't, right? This is a way to get the buffs off of the enemy without triggering polymorph. And then it has a 100% chance of increasing the cooldowns of all enemy skills by 3 turns. So we have Alice, who is a lockout champion. Fabian is a better lockout champion because it's 3 turns. I believe Alice is a 2-turn cooldown increase. So this is really, if you don't have a lockout champion other than Alice, this is going to give you another lockout champion. And then grants an extra turn if there are no buffs on the enemy team after this attack. You're probably going to strip all of the buffs off of the enemy. Then you can lock them out. Then you can get an extra turn. Then you can go into this skill or whatever you want to do. The extra turn almost feels like it's unnecessary because after this turn happens, the enemy's not doing anything. But it's a pretty powerful skill. Pretty powerful. It's an incredibly powerful skill. And I think this is why we're all going to want this champion. Definitely usable in PvP because this will ignore Stone Skin. Right? This is a way to get through Stone Skin and to negate the power of Stone Skin with that lockout. But it's also going to be very usable in PvE because not only is it an AoE attack, right? But it's going to be that buff strip. It's just going to help you with wave content. Now let's look at the passive Ghost with the most. Whenever an enemy is revived, places a True Fear debuff on that enemy for 2 turns. Remember the passive here, right? So the petrification can happen when an enemy gets a turn, right? So for instance, imagine an enemy is revived with 100% turn meter. We've seen that recently, right? So they could go right away, but they've got True Fear. So either they're going to lose their turn right away, or they're going to get their turn and then be petrified. So this is really a great counter revive kind of champion as well. And then removes any stun, freeze, sleep, provoke, fear, True Fear, and petrification debuffs from this champion before the start of their turn. So he can't be hard CC'd either. He even removes petrification. The only thing that he could be locked out with would be like a block passives or a block active skill or a sheep. He could be sheep, polymorphed. All right, so he's not immune to that. This feels like a very strong champion. Definitely good in PvP. He's going to be god tier in PvP. We're going to all be seeing him everywhere in the next few weeks, right? Starting in 2 weeks from now, we're going to see Fabian. Classic Arena, Live Arena, 3v3 Arena, Siege. We're going to see him all over the place. So keep your eyes out for videos from your favorite content creators. because I'm sure they're going to be experimenting with builds and uses for this champion. All right, so now let's go take a look at his calendar, and I can give you my no-fail fusion plan for those of you who have decided to pursue Lord Entertainer Fabian. As you can see, it's a classic fusion. The epic is right there. You can see she is a void epic. That's going to matter. We're going to talk about how this is planned out a little bit, because this seems like a fairly unfriendly fusion event calendar in some ways. Basically, if we look at the shard events, right, we have several days before the first shard event because we started on a Monday. So the first shard event happens on a Friday, and this is a summon rush. Typically, the best way to complete summon rushes is with sacred shards. Now, sacred shards only yield epics and legendaries. So we have a void epic here, you can't get her, and then we have regular rares and you can't get them from the summon rush if you're using sacred shards. Now, the 2x weekend will be the second weekend. This will be the 2x weekend. I'm not sure what it will be. We had 2x primals this past weekend. If we go back to the regular rotation, this could be 2 times ancients, or they could skip ancients and go directly to voids, or they could do what I think they're going to do, which is have a 2 times everything weekend. I think that's what's going to happen, which will be kind of interesting. But we know it's going to be a 2 times weekend. We just don't know what it is. And this is going to be during the champion chase. Now, I don't mind 2 times ancients during champion chase. I actually think that's great. But the problem here is this is the event where if you're pulling ancient shards, you could potentially get an extra copy of Hide Stitcher Born, who is the rare, right? But this is going to be a very late place to get an extra copy of a rare. Basically, it'll help you maybe, cut out one of these Dungeon Divers events or a gear enhancement event if you need to at the very end. But it would have been better to have that champion chase early on or ancient shard, event early on so that you could actually get copies of this rare for free. And that would allow you to potentially skip events as you go, because you need 16 copies of this rare. That's going to fuse into 4 copies of the epic. And then you need the 4 epics to fuse into the copy of Fabian. Now, be aware that the event is actually, I think it's 17 days. It goes all the way to March 26th. But on this last day, all you can do basically is fuse your champions. So you need to complete all of the events by the 25th right here. And that's just the way this is going to work. Now, it's possible that you could do some of the summon rush with ancient shards or void shards if you wanted to. I don't do that as a free-to-play player. I avoid that. I'm going to try to complete this summon rush with as few resources as I can. Now, on my challenge account, I only have, I think, 2 or 3. I think I might have 3 sacreds. And this is likely to be a 6 sacred event. So I may have to complete the rest using ancient shards or other shards. We're going to have to see how I can do this, because you will need to complete all 16 events. Be aware that during the summon rush, you do have an opportunity to go for the epic. So if the points here aren't too bad, it may make more sense to go ahead and just utilize all the resources, get the copy of the epic, and that's going to give you a much better chance to go and get the entire fusion done, because then you can avoid the champion chase and maybe a couple of, harder events for you if you are doing a challenge count and your resources are low. However, I think you're going to lose value on a 2 times weekend that way. So, you have to make that decision. You have to weigh those options, because either way you go, you're going to be giving up something. That's what I said. I said before, it's like, I don't think this is a particularly friendly event. First of all, classic fusions can be a little bit more intense because you have to do all of the training as well. Don't forget to get your potions, right? You're going to need void potions. You're going to need the magic potions, the affinity potions, in order to get these guys fused into Fabian. If you don't have those, you can't get it done. And again, that doesn't show up on your calendar anywhere. So you're not double dipping with that, unless you can do maybe a little bit of champion training in the potion keeps. That's never a bad idea. Okay, so just be aware of these shard events and how they're working in this particular fusion event. But now let's go ahead and talk our way through the entire event calendar. All right, let's start with today, March 10th. As you can see, we have a Dungeon Divers event, Dragon Tournament, and a Champion Training event. This is always a really nice way to start off a fusion event. If you can triple dip here, you want to. So if you have a dragon team that can farm dragon 20 with, say, just a solo champion, that would be great. Or even a duo or a trio, so you can put in a couple of food champions to get some champion training points while you're getting the dungeon divers and the dragon tournament. That's what you want to do. This is going to be 2K in terms of energy. But be aware that it looks like this is basically ending before the Ice Golem starts, which is fine. So this is going to be, a 5K Dungeon Divers event. You're going to want to overshoot probably with your Dragon Tournament or do a lot of champion training in campaign to get some points there, although those aren't as efficient. But if you're doing champion training with energy, right, then you want to get all of that done before the end of this Dungeon Divers event, because the next one will probably not start until the champion training event is basically done. So any champion training you do in campaign should be in this window of the Dungeon Divers event as well. So this 2K should be embedded in the Dungeon Divers event, but like I said, it's probably going to be drop rate stuff. In fact, I'm pretty sure there is, so you may want to use that and just go all in on that Dragon Tournament. Now, that should give you the silver to complete the Gear Enhancement Event 1, so that shouldn't be too tricky. And then we get into the Ice Golem Tournament. You want to hold off. Don't do the first day of the Ice Golem Tournament. Wait until the Dungeon Divers Event 2 has started, and then get all of your 2K energy in here during this time. As you can see, this is also going to be one of those where it's 5K, and you're just going to have to overinvest somewhere. There is champion training on the back end of it, so you could try to put a lot of energy into the back end of this, but be aware that it's going to be tricky, right? Because this is just one day of champion training, and champion training doesn't return nearly as much points. Like campaign doesn't return nearly as many Dungeon Divers points as a dungeon does. So you're probably going to want to overinvest in this Ice Golem tournament, or if you don't want to farm Ice Golem, finish the Ice Golem tournament and then go back to Dragon or go to Spider or do something else, go to Fire Knight. But you're going to need to drop a lot of energy into this Dungeon Divers event that doesn't come here. So unfortunately, these Dungeon Divers events are not as efficient as we've seen in some past events. Now, the Classic Arena Takedown, I'm not too worried about. Just be active. You should be able to get that done. Again, champion training, this is where you want to do a lot of campaign. And then here is probably where you're going to use the Tavern to complete that champion training. Remember that because this is a classic fusion, you can train up the copies of the rares and the epics that you get during these champion training events. So you can use them right away, right? Now, if you want to hold off, you can, but this is not one of those things where like you can use them in the champion chase, because these aren't fragment champions. You just collect them as the events end. They're the full copies of the champions. So the champion chase tournament is not something that you can really manipulate with these fusion champions. So just go ahead and start leveling them up during any champion training event. So, if you can get this gear enhancement done before the champion training event ends, then you can literally do, 3 copies or 4 copies during the champion training, and you can repeat that process down the line down here with the second event as well. So again, like this gear enhancement event, do that right away, get it done, and then you can put this copy of, or one of these copies into the champion training tournament. Same with the Spider tournament, get that done early. This is going to be 2K. You can see this one actually doesn't overlap a Dungeon Divers event at all. So this is just going to be 2K by itself. And then the Fire Knight tournament, again, hold off on the first day. Don't do this. Make sure the full 2K goes into the Dungeon Divers here. Again, this is going to be a 5K event. The Champion Chase tournament we already talked about. The Classic Arena Takedown is pretty easy, and you should have plenty of silver for these gear enhancements. I think the one thing about all of these Dungeon Divers events here, we got 3 Dungeon Divers events, and none of them really are fully utilizing the dungeon events themselves. So like the Dragon tournament and stuff like that, like those aren't, I don't know how to say this, but I guess like we don't have 2 tournaments going into any of the Dungeon Diver event. So we've got so much extra energy that we have to spend here. This is going to be a minimum of 17,000 energy. All right. So it's going to be 17K plus energy, because you need to do the 3 Dungeon Divers, plus you need to do the the Spider tournament, which is just hanging in the air. It's not a double dip with anything. I mean, if you can do some champion training with the Spider tournament, great, but it's at least 17K energy. And based on how we're seeing the champion training events going as well, it's probably going to be something more like, 19 or 20,000 energy. So just be aware, the fairly energy expensive fusion event, as well as the stuff we had with the shards. So again, I don't think this is a friendly event at all. I think it's going to be relatively difficult to complete. It's going to require a lot of resources. But the one place maybe where we get a little bit back is on these gear enhancement events. Because we have to spend so much extra energy in dungeons, we're going to have more silver this time out. So I'm hoping that the gear enhancement events will be relatively easy. But again, we're looking at probably somewhere in the vicinity of 60 million silver for these 3 events. Now, be aware that if you are a lower level account, like if you're on a challenge account and you're only level 55 or something like I am, your point totals in some of these tournaments might not be as high. So you may be able to get by with less than 60 million silver. That may happen. You want to check that in the game as those events and tournaments pop up. Make sure that you understand your point totals and how much energy and silver it's going to require for you to reach your goals and get the copies of the rare, so that you don't miss out. And again, you have to be perfect. There are 16 events, so unless you happen to go all in on the summon rush and, get an extra copy of this epic, you're going to have to do all 16 events. That's probably what I'm going to do. But I'm going to, I'm going to look at this. When this summon rush pops up, I'm going to look at this and see whether or not it's worth going for the epic. Because remember, an epic is worth 4 events. So potentially that could save me, a whole lot of dungeon diving or a whole lot of gear enhancement. Okay. So that is the no-fail fusion plan for this month. Let me know in the comments below if I missed anything. Are you going for Fabian? Are you going to take a pass? Are you doing it on your challenge account? I hope you are, because I know I am. I'm going for him on both accounts. And honestly, it's going to be a little bit tough for me because I am going away on vacation for like 4 days. I think I'm right in here. I'm going to be gone for 4 days. And I'm only going to be able to play on my phone. So I'm going to have to play both accounts on my phone, switching back and forth while I'm on vacation with my family. Going to be a little bit tricky, so we'll see if I can do this. I don't want to miss out, though. I think this is a great champion, so I'm going to be going for it. All right, that is it for me today. Thanks so much for hanging out. I have been Colred. I will see you in another video soon.